welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker. I am joined this week by my wife, Melissa Huff.
Hello.
Okay, so this podcast, of course, is available to everybody on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, as well as with video here on YouTube. And also, by the way, there is a special announcement or communication I have for everybody regarding my channel and the status of it and that sort of thing, some behind-the-scenes stuff at the end of this podcast. So please be sure to check that out as well when you're all done watching the podcast. So we've got a lot of things to talk about this week. I brought Melissa back because it is time that I've been wanting to do this for a while now. It is time that we do an episode about depression, anxiety, mental health, and basically living with that. Now, I've talked to a lot of counselors and therapists on my channel. I intend to talk to many more about, from a professional's point of view, getting out of destructive cults, dealing with narcissistic relationships, dealing with the after effects or aftermath of being involved in a totalist system or in a narcissistic relationship, basically the same thing. And I have not, and of course I've done a lot of interviews with former members of Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Christian cults, a lot of different extremist type totalist groups. But this one is not, there's nothing I've done yet that is really quite as personal as this. I could say, well, all my talking about Scientology was certainly personal. But this is kind of present time, this is not something I'm talking about that happened. This show is not about something that happened in the past. This is about something that's happening right now. And I know that I kind of dominated our last podcast. I will not be doing that this time, but there is a little intro that I want to give here about my back experience with depression and anxiety and mental illness and the concept of that. Because I do come from a Scientology background, and Scientology absolutely denies that mental illness is a problem or is a thing. It asserts that L. Ron Hubbard discovered this thing called the reactive mind. We were talking about this the other night. And that all the problems that a person experiences in their day-to-day life is due to the influence of this subconscious sort of mind called the reactive mind in Scientology. The reactive mind, as far as I'm concerned, is a fantasy, but for most of my life, I believed wholeheartedly in it. I was raised with the idea that this was a thing. And the idea in Scientology is that by auditing, by doing the Scientology's version of counseling, you will be stripping away bits and pieces of this reactive mind. And you could analogize it to, I guess that's the right word, to a big huge pile of manure or coal or something. You got a pickaxe or a shovel, and you just got to go into your auditing counseling sessions and just pick at that thing. It's just this big solid mass, and it's huge, gigantic, and you carry it around with you everywhere you go. And all of the stress and trauma and problems and issues that you have, and the anger, whether it's anger issues or grief issues or anxiety or all of that, is the reason for it is somewhere in that big pile. Or there's multiple things in that pile causing that condition. And by doing Scientology auditing, that's the only solution possible. And you tackle that mountain of crap, which in Scientology, that's what they call your case. And you get rid of it, you erase it bit by bit by bit. And by doing that, you're supposed to arrive at this place of mental and spiritual enlightenment and awareness where you no longer would have any mental health issues of any kind. You'd be perfectly wonderful. That's the theory in Scientology, and it's the one that I subscribed to for a very long time. And Hubbard spent a lot of time ridiculing and deriding psychiatry for their lack of solutions to any kind of mental health problems. And so Scientologists are indoctrinated to believe that psychiatry has no solutions whatsoever and in fact is incredibly damaging to people, that all it does is hurt people and causes them to do worse and do bad things. And like mass shootings are uniformly blamed on psychiatry if you talk to a Scientologist. Any kind of pharmaceuticals, all bad. What you need is auditing, not drugs. And so they make these points in their in Scientology's propaganda pieces. They set up a group called the Citizens Commission for Human Rights in 1969, which had the sole purpose of eradicating psychiatry from the face of the earth. So there is no sympathy or empathy or compassion or understanding or tolerance of psychiatry from Scientology. That's where I was 5-6 years ago. Like, I fully bought into it. I read, there were books in Scientology that were written by Scientologists about psychiatry. I read those. I thought the DSM was complete nonsense. I still have issues with all of these things, but I thought that it was like literally the work of Satan, to make that comparison. So when I got out of Scientology, one of the first things I realized that I needed to address or deal with was, did I have this hatred of psychiatry because of what L. Ron Hubbard said, or was it because there were real issues in present time about psychiatry? And what I found out is that all the Scientology propaganda had to do with the history of psychiatry. And we watched, or watched some of, one of Scientology has put together like 5 or 6 documentaries on the evils of psychiatry. And their main header, the first one and the most grueling and gruesome one, is called Psychiatry and Industry of Death. So in preparation for this, we watched it. So now, what was your impression of that? What message did you get?
They were just like focusing on the past, which psychiatry has a pretty checkered past. There's some really horrible things that we did to the mentally ill like 100 years ago, 50 years ago even. But it's changed, and it's not fair to keep going back to what they used to do. You got to look at what they're doing now. Yes, it's not perfect. Yes, it's got a long way to go, but it's not this like demonic, evil, let's strap people to the, table and, remove body parts and stuff kind of stuff anymore.
Yeah, and it's sad but true that is in the history of psychiatry, and it does have a troubled past, to say the least. But to use that against psychiatry now, or psychology now, is just taking things out of context. It's just a huge logical fallacy. It would be like, to make an analogy, judging all Germans now based on what happened in World War II.
Exactly.
You could do that, but you'd be wrong for doing that, because none of the people who were doing that stuff, or very few of them, are even still around. And things have changed. It's been recognized that these practices that were going on back in the day were barbaric and literally were torture. I mean, dunking people and, waterboarding people and drowning them as a kind of cure. Hurting people or not. They were just clueless about how do you deal with somebody who is in a manic fit. They didn't know what to do. So they became very desperate, and they did desperate things. Not to excuse any of it. It was barbaric. It was torture. It was awful. But that was then. This is now. And if we're going to talk about this field, we should be talking about what's going on in it now. And it's not like they've cured all the illnesses. It's a nuanced thing, They don't have cures. They have coping mechanisms. They have ways of dealing with things so that your life can be a bit more livable, So I just want to kind of get that out of the way to start off with, right? Because that's the background I came at this from. And like I said, I was full on, hardcore, absolutely believed all of the things that Hubbard said about this. So in addition to tackling it after I got out of Scientology, I also started expanding the number of people that I knew in life. And I ran into people who had mental illnesses, who had conditions. And I started learning firsthand, which is something I never could learn in Scientology, that some people take psychotropic medications and really benefit from them. Not everyone, it's not universal. There are, there's side effects, which we'll really just call effects, that can be damaging to some people. It's a very much, it's a very individual thing. There is no blanket, this will cure everybody's problems with depression or, or OCD or whatever. Mm-hmm. Even the language is still in flux and morphing. So it's not like we're doing this podcast with the idea that, well, it's all perfect now. What's the problem?
Yeah.
Right.
I wish.
Right. Okay, so that all being said, tell us about you.
Okay, well, I come at it from a very personal perspective because I do have anxiety and depression and a side of PTSD, so a little combo of everything there. And so I've struggled with that most of my life. I remember the first time feeling depressed and suicidal in junior high. So it's just, I didn't officially get diagnosed with a lot of this stuff until about 6 or 7 years ago, but it's always been there, and I've have these experiences with it. I've changed my mind about a lot of things. I used to be very anti-med. Now that I've discovered the right combination of medicine, I'm very excited about medication. So yeah, it's a long history. I also have family members with mental illness, and growing up around that, I grew up around people with bipolar. I've had friends with bipolar, so I've definitely seen that aspect of it, and it's just something that is complicated, and like you're talking about medicine, and it's not a one size fits all. It's actually a complicated process to figure out what's going to work for you, because the first thing you try may not work. In fact, it probably won't, and you have to play around a little bit and go, okay, does this one work? What if I combine it with that one? And, it took a while for me to figure out which combination was best for me. And there are side effects that really suck sometimes. And you have to kind of decide what's more important, the not being depressed or the, having some sluggishness or something like that.
Right, exactly. And this is a thing, by the way, that I wondered about how broadly this kind of information that we're going to talk about here, that we're talking about right now, was needed out there. The whole purpose of my channel is education, and sure, I throw my opinions out there, and I got some strong ones about some things, but mostly I'm interested in bringing new information to you guys. And we have found, what there's another reason we're doing this is because I have observed that just because I was in Scientology, I'm not the only person who has some pretty gross misconceptions about the nature of mental illness. What kind of things have you run into?
Like people's ignorance, you mean? Like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. People thinking that you can just exercise it away, and it's like, okay, exercise helps.
Now, exercise as in
go for a jog, or
not exercising like demons.
Yeah.
Although there are people who think that too.
There are, yes, that is.
But no, the exercise is kind of,
it helps. It can make you feel better for a little while, but it doesn't cure it. It doesn't make it go away forever. And sometimes you're so depressed you can't even imagine getting up and going and exercising, and it's hard to explain that to someone that hasn't been through it. But or like, for example, one of my friends that's bipolar, someone told him, you just need to find Jesus, like Jesus is going to cure bipolar somehow. It's just ridiculous. And I've run into people that tell me that I just need to have the right diet and or it's, you're not really depressed, you're just lazy, or, just all these kinds of things, like, and it's really tough because you know what you're going through, and you know how depressed you are, and you know that it's a physical illness as well as a mental illness. And these people coming at you with all this bad advice and ignorant advice, and then they don't listen to you. That's what's really frustrating for me with both my mental illnesses and being type 1 diabetic, is like, people don't listen to the person going through the experience. They have a preconceived notion, and it doesn't matter what you tell them. You're wrong. I've got the right answer. And it's like, well, I'm the one going through this. I'm the one who's been going through it my whole life. So why am I the one that's wrong?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, which is not to say that, trained professionals don't know things.
Right.
But listen to the patient. It kind of is important. And you've run into way too many instances where that's happened, where you've gone to get professional help and the doctor doesn't even hardly listen to what you say before they're telling you everything that's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, when I first got diagnosed with depression and anxiety and all that, they were trying to... This woman just met with me for like 5 minutes and was trying to say that I had, some kind of low-level bipolar, and was trying to give me... antipsychotics. And she was trying to give me those, and I'm like, I don't have psychosis. I'm just depressed, So I had to go through a series of doctors. I mean, I've been through a lot, and I've been through doctors that don't listen to me, that don't respond when you're having an emergency situation. I mean, really, the best person that I've ever had was a nurse practitioner, like a psychiatric nurse practitioner. She was the best one I ever had, and I wish I could have her back. But yeah, they don't always listen to you. They just kind of assume what's going on, and then it's a one-size-fits-all kind of thing sometimes. And it's difficult to find a psychiatrist that will really listen and really help you out. Yeah,
well, I think the key word there was assuming. I did an episode, not watched by a lot of people, and yeah, I'm a little bitter about that, but whatever. I put out an episode this week about assuming things, because that has a lot to do with critical thinking. It was a critical thinking video, and as opposed to a Scientology or cult-related video. And I talked about assumptions because I used to make lots of assumptions about mental illness, and I see other people doing that with you on social media. I mean, strangers or even people you kind of sort of know.
Yeah.
And it's been commented on before, but it's worth repeating that because it's not something you can physically see, there's no physical symptomology to depression. Excuse me. So therefore, you're just making it up.
Right.
You're just faking it. You're just... it's not real. Go take a walk,
Yeah, you're just doing it because you don't want to do things. You want to get out of having to do things. And it's like, no, when I'm depressed, I really do want to do things. It's just I'm so depressed that I can't. There's a gentleman, Andrew Solomon, I think is his name, and he does a lot of work with depression, and he's got a couple TED Talks out there, and the best way he ever described depression was like, it's so difficult when you're depressed that you can't even do things like make a sandwich because it sounds too hard, because you have to go in the kitchen, you have to get the bread out, you have to get the food, the meat, the cheese out, and it just is so overwhelming. And it's like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. Everything is overwhelming when you're depressed, and you try to talk yourself out of it. You try to force yourself out of it, but it's just there. It's just this agonizing internal pain and it has physical effects too. I mean, it makes you sleepy and want to just sleep all day long. It makes it, sometimes there's even physical pain along with it and that kind of thing. It's not something you can just snap out of.
No, it's not. And, I haven't really talked about this very much at all in the years that I've been doing my channel here. Because one of the reasons for this is because I have been coming to my own conclusions and realizations and sort of awareness within myself about some of this that I also deal with too from time to time. It's not as serious as what you've had to deal with or what some other people I know have had to deal with. But coming out of Scientology, I mean, we all talk about PTSD. That's a thing. That's real. I mean, you have things that happen to you that I've had things that have happened to me that are completely out of my control. I don't get to choose whether I have nightmares or not. I don't get to choose whether I'm, walking down the street or sitting at my chair here or watching TV or whatever, and suddenly, out of nowhere, have this cloud of, I don't know how to describe it. It comes over you, and suddenly, nothing matters. Suddenly, nothing matters at all. And the world just sucks. Everything sucks. There's nothing that can be done about anything. And I came to realize fairly recent, last year and a half or so, in talking to you and talking to other people, that I've had to struggle with some of that too, in part of this, ongoing recovery process. And I came to realize that a lot of people that I used to know in Scientology, in the Sea Org especially, definitely are suffering from some kind of, mental disorders or mental illnesses. And it's, I hesitate to still, even to this day, I hesitate to talk about this because of all the stigma attached to it. This like judgment factor that happened. Oh, you poor person. Like, that's not particularly what I'm talking about this for. I'm not talking about this, or I'm not asking you to talk about it so that we can gain sympathy. It's about raising awareness of the fact that this is a real thing, and that the people who experience these kind of things, me included from time to time, don't have a choice in the matter. Mm-hmm. The thing that actually when I first registered for me that this was something beyond a person's ability to control. I don't have his name, and I didn't look it up before we got started here, but the lead singer for Imagine Dragons was on Howard Stern. This was years ago. He was on there, and I heard the episode way after it had happened. And he described suffering from depression and the fact that, you could make it in the music industry. You could be married to this wonderful person. You can have this incredible career. Money's not a problem. You've got a family. You've got kids. I mean, there's a lot of things in your life that are very, very good. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. And yet you still feel like none of this matters. None of it is helpful. Exactly. None of it means anything. And when you hit those episodes, man, it's just like some bear came along and just walloped you. There's not, and then well-intentioned people, trying to help out. Well, you should, it's probably your diet, or well, it's, you just need to take a walk.
You've got a lot of good things going on. It's like, that's not why I'm depressed.
Well, that was the thing that I realized, that's when it really hit me, was it's like, it's having every reason in the world to not be depressed or not be anxious, because the same thing goes for anxiety as far as I can tell.
Oh, yeah.
Having no real logical reason to feel that way, and yet feeling that way anyway. And it's not like there's something. Yeah, sure, it's something kind of wrong. I mean, you don't like this. It doesn't. You wish it wasn't this way. What I mean to say is that it's not so easy to do something about it. People who don't suffer from these conditions have ups and downs in their life.
Oh, sure.
And when they do, sometimes you can go take a walk, or you can eat some sugar, feel a little pepped up, or stop eating some sugar so you don't feel so pepped up, go have some fruit or vegetables or something, or they can, go buy a new dress, or, buy a new car, or, do something for themselves, take themselves out to eat or something. And that does it for them. yeah, I'm out of my little funk, you know. That's not what we're talking about. These are actually two totally different things. And I think part of the problem I'm thinking right now in even discussing this sort of thing is the fact that we use the same words.
Right. Yeah, it's like, because people, I think, tend to think that depression and sadness are the exact same thing. And there's sadness as a part of depression. It's not the entire thing. It's like dread is what depression is. It's like this just horrible dread. You're sad. You can't do anything. You don't want to do anything. Everything sounds hard, no matter what it is. I mean, the most simple things. And some people will go, well, that's just laziness. But it's like, if you've actually been there, it's not just laziness. It's like physical. It's a physical thing. Like, you can't get out of bed. You can't do the things you want to do. And you do want to do them, but you can't do them. And it's this sense of just self-hatred, you know? It's just like, I don't matter. I can't do any of these things anyways. And you can't concentrate because all you feel is that dread. You know, one of my favorite musicians and songwriters, Stephen Page, he's got depression. And I remember him saying one time that he can't write his music when he's in that state of mind. And I get that. I totally get that, because there's just, you can't pull that creativity out because it's just so much dread. And it's just so hard to put it into words to make it make sense. But
well, yeah, I mean, I can certainly say as a writer that, you know, that creativity is sort of the polar opposite of what this is, you know, because creativity is a zone that you get into. And when you're in it, it's the most amazing thing. It is wonderful. It's like just everything's open and you're focused, and it's just this amazing sort of feeling of that you're creating something valuable and important. And I'm sure, you know, songwriters and painters and actors and performers, I'm sure all of us share this feeling, you know, and there's been so many ways that artists have tried to describe it. And yeah, you know, I certainly can't get any of the work done. And I'm kind of a workaholic. I mean, I work all the time. But when, you know, something like this happens, it's not,
you
no.
just can't operate.
No.
It's like, just imagine the worst thing that ever happened to you, and then you just feel that way for like maybe a week, maybe 3 months straight. You know, just depends on how the episode feels like going that time. But, you know, there's that reactive feeling to that worst thing ever, and that's how you feel for an extended amount of time. And no matter what you do, no matter how many walks you take, no matter how many coffees you have, no matter, you know, how many friends you hang out with, it's still there, you know?
Right, right. Because it's not something that's susceptible to being dealt with through some simple method. Mm-hmm. That's really the point, you know, and we kind of probably beaten a dead horse in talking about this, but we just really want to get across that it's not what people who don't suffer from this or haven't experienced it. It's generally what we seem to keep running into and having conversations with people on social media or in real life about it is they just assume way too much about this, and they don't listen to the person who's actually suffering. And there's a point there also, which is that every single person is unique. You know,
right.
Your descriptions of this not only are different than what other people might describe it, but they should be different because people experience this in lots of different ways. So you really do. It's important to listen to the person who's trying to describe what they're going through, because they're going to tell it to you in a way that makes sense to them.
Right.
So even listening to, you know, how Melissa's describing this right now or how I describe it right now, that's what we're experiencing. That's not to say this is some big blanket statement of what everybody else experiences. Hey everyone, I actually have a short commercial break here on my podcast this week because I have a sponsor on my show now, and that is BetterHelp.com. And this is an online therapy service that I think is probably the single best choice I could have made for a first sponsor for my channel. Because, of course, of all the content that I put up about therapy and help and getting assistance when you need it. And the fact of the matter is that at different times in our life, all of us need some help. And this service is something I'm endorsing because I believe in it, and I think it's something that could help you too. There is a link right here that is in the description section of all of my videos from this point forward that you can use in order to get to BetterHelp.com. It is a 24-hour service. It is not, though, a crisis line. There is a difference. This is for ongoing regular treatment. Not for emergencies or suicide services or something like that. There are other numbers or services to contact if you need that help. But either through text or phone or chat or video, you have 4 different modes of contacting a licensed therapist for help using BetterHelp.com. What you do is you go to their page and there's a brief survey that you fill out. And then you are, like I said, contacted within 24 hours. If you have a problem with the person that you're hooked up with, you can get another one. There is no need to stay stuck with somebody that is not helping you out. And sometimes that's even a good thing to, get a different experience from different people in getting assistance. I have found a lot of help through my family and friends, but I have found sometimes that there are not always the best people to talk to. Sometimes they're the worst because they know too much about you, or they are biased, or they have various prejudices, or they're trying to solve your problems for you instead of just listening to you. There can be all kinds of issues with that. Sometimes an objective, trained professional is exactly what you need, and especially for people who are in any kind of recovery. And the best thing about this service is it's actually really affordable. We're talking about $35, $60, I think at the top end, like $80 a week or something. It's not an expensive service, and there is financial assistance available for people who are actually experiencing tough economic times. So reach out to this channel, get some help, BetterHelp.com, use the link below. Let me know how it goes.
Well, and the same thing is true going back to medicine is like what works for me, Wellbutrin, Abilify, and Klonopin, and that's a great combination. But for some people, it's going to give them a really bad reaction, and that is not going to work out well for them, and it's the same kind of thing. So you can't blanket and be like, why aren't you on this drug, because I know, like I said, I had to play around. I took some antidepressants that had some very interesting side effects before.
Yeah, exactly. And that actually leads to another point, which is also a critical thinking point, which is just because, you have experienced something in your life that has caused you positive change doesn't necessarily mean everybody else is going to experience that same thing. Just because you're on a certain combination of meds doesn't mean that would do it for me or for somebody else. But way too many, again, this goes into assumptions. I'm just going to keep harping on that because that's what I'm doing because it's on my mind. But people can make those assumptions, and they're very unwarranted assumptions. We're not even remotely in a place yet where we have universally, workable and applicable solutions for all the problems that people are experiencing. I mean, we know certain things that are obviously universally applicable. If you're starving, get some food. If you haven't had any water in a week, odds are everybody would universally respond to having some water, right? I mean, there's that kind of thing, but we don't have universally applicable answers to mental illness issues, and so that's just another kind of important thing about the advice on this is listen more than talk. You don't necessarily know how to cure or solve the problem. That's something this person's going to have to figure out working with professionals and with caring friends and family. Absolutely care. be part of the solution. Don't be part of the problem, but part of that being part of the solution is listening a lot, you know. And this is kind of the same kind of advice I give when I'm talking to, you know, people. We're getting people out of cults, you know, is stop talking and listen more, because the person who goes into a destructive cult situation will probably tell you exactly how to get them out of it if you listen enough. You know, instead of telling them everything that you think they should know. No, they need to come to their own conclusions, you know. And anyway, it's...
Well, and the other thing is, it's like, stop trying to solve it and cure it, because there is currently no cure. So you're going to have episodes the rest of your life. And that sucks, but it's just the truth. And like, for instance, you know, at one point when I first started taking meds and stuff like that, you know, I was always looking for the answer that was going to make me never have a depressive or anxiety event ever again. And the truth is, what I've learned is that's just right now not possible. Like, I can keep them further in between episodes, and the episodes aren't nearly as nasty as they used to be, but I can't ever just stop them completely, and you have to come to terms with that, and so do the people around you, that it's not gonna go away.
Yeah, that's right. Now, we of course have had a lot of conversations in the time that we've known each other about, you know, how I can be supportive and helpful, you know, when this sort of thing is going on. Why don't you explain or talk about that?
I would say to be supportive, kind of like what you're saying, just listen to the person, be there for them, you know, just hang out with them. Even if they're not saying a lot or doing a lot and it's kind of boring, you know, just hang out with them and be there and watch some TV with them and let them cry on your shoulder and let them tell you, you know, that hurts. Don't be giving a lot of advice and telling them, oh, go do this, go do that. Just let them tell you what they need. Let them take control, and you just be there for them, you know? Like, at least that's for me what I need, you know, is I just need someone to give me a hug and take me for a walk and, you know, do those kind of things, like, you know, get me up and moving when I don't want to do anything, to have someone be like, okay, let's go for a walk, or let's go get a cheeseburger, you know, but not in a, like, you have to do this kind of way, just in a very friendly, suggestive sort of way, you know, try to help the person get out of the house, help the person, you know, do something that distracts them from the depression for 5 minutes, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I've had to unlearn a lot of things, of course, from my Scientology years. But also I think it's kind of inherent in males, maybe. Maybe friends, too, of any gender. I don't know that it really matters, but I've noticed it more with males, that, and certainly in myself, that when someone is having a problem or an issue of some kind, I want to help them solve it. Excuse me. And I want to give them suggestions or advice, or, oh, well, maybe try this or maybe try that. Perfectly well-intentioned. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I've had to come to learn, not always wanted. Not always what the doctor ordered, you know. Sometimes my suggestions are just foolish because I don't have all the information. I try to get all the information before I start doing that sort of thing, but, you know, not perfect. But also just, I mean, you know, what I've had to sort of push out of my response toolkit or whatever is, you know, is that this kind of a thing isn't a problem to be solved. Mm-hmm. That's just the wrong view of it, because it doesn't work that way. It doesn't surrender to some magic bullet solution that you're going to come up with, because it's not caused by some physical universe condition or situation. it happens in spite of it, in fact. Again, you could have all the money, you could have wonderful kids, perfect family, relatives all good, job's fine, like everything's fine. And then boom, there it is. It's happening to you. You're riding this wave that is just out of your control. You're suddenly being lifted up on this, this ocean of horribleness. And so you can't talk a person out of that. And that was sort of something I had to learn over and over and over again until it finally started getting through my slow learning head that that's not how you deal with it, because you're not dealing with the cause of the problem when you're trying to solve physical universe problems the person's having. It's different,
Yeah.
So I have come to learn as a support person and, husband, that it's about just being there, being comforting, being helpful in any way, however the person needs it, including leave me alone for a while. That can happen too. Okay, not a problem. I'm always here, whatever you need, and I'm going to be right over there, or I'm a phone call away, or whatever, and that's the best you can do sometimes. And you want to do more, you wish you could do more. It's frustrating to not be able to sometimes. But you can't force your help on somebody, nor would you really want to. But the main thing for me was recognizing that I wasn't solving the right problem in the first place. Because I get upset and you get upset all the time about things that go on in the real world.
Right.
Those things we can do something about.
Right.
These things, these kind of episodes, on the other hand, are a whole different animal. What other sorts of misconceptions have you run into in your life with this?
I would say one of the biggest ones, like, for a lot of people with depression, because I know I had a suicide attempt when I was in college long ago, freshman year, and it obviously didn't work. It wasn't exactly the best suicide attempt because it was a friggin' bottle of Tylenol and some alcohol. But like, a lot of people think, oh, you're just trying to get attention. That's the worst. Like, when people have a suicide attempt and it doesn't go all the way through, it's just for attention. And that's the worst attitude, I think, that we have with depression, because no one is doing that for attention. They're doing that because they're crying out for help. They are in that much pain and suffering that they just want it to end. And that's the thing with depression. That's why people are led to suicide. It's not because some shitty thing happened, or, it's because that pain that you're feeling is so great and it feels so unending that you're just like, what else do? I can't stop it, And so that's definitely a misconception that I think is terrible. Is like, do not ever, when someone makes an attempt, be like, oh, that's for attention. That's just ridiculous.
Meaning, because a cry for help is a kind of attempt to get attention, but not your. I just want to be clear, not like you're trying to be an attention whore, or you're just trying to, hey, it's all about me now. Everybody should pay attention to me. That's what you're. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like that. You're trying to get help. And what other misconceptions? I know there's more. Like, just that all you have to do is, oh, you just need more therapy. It'll go away, and stuff like that. And it's like, and it took a long time for me to realize that wasn't the solution either, because therapy helps, and I love therapy, but it's not going to cure my depression or my anxiety. It's just not. Those things are going to pop up when they pop up and feel like, coming around and causing some chaos. And there's, I have coping mechanisms now that I've learned from the therapy, but it doesn't stop it.
Well, I was going to ask you how. So, in other words, the therapy won't cure it, but it's not that that's not helpful.
Right. It is very helpful. It's just once you have a mental illness, there's no cure for it. It's not going anywhere. You can treat it and keep it under control. I mean, I know people that are bipolar that are on medication and they haven't had a manic episode in a really long time. That doesn't necessarily mean that is going to last forever. Hopefully it does. I mean, I don't wish any ill on any of my bipolar friends and relatives, but it's just like, you never know.
Well, it's the thing. I mean, and that's why we stress that, that there are not cures for this as such, in the same way that, you get a cut, you put some salve on it and throw a Band-Aid on it and it'll heal, and then you won't have that cut anymore. It will be gone. In this case, it's more kind of like with the medications for some people or other coping mechanisms they might learn about through therapy or however they do it. It's more like the cut's there, the Band-Aid goes on, but you can't take the Band-Aid off because the cut's still there.
Right.
It's always going to be there, but the Band-Aid effectively, maybe chills it out, helps it, kind of a lame analogy, but I'm just trying to...
Yeah, no, I get it, yeah.
This also reminds me that this is one of the things that people who are critical of psychiatry, like Scientology, will put forward. Well, psychiatry has no cures. Therefore, none of it works. Therefore, it's all a fraud. Well, that's not true. It's the only field of study that has any kind of attempt to use some science. I can't say that was true 50 years ago, but I can say it now. And it's, when you look at, well, okay, what alternatives are you offering?
Well, right.
Scientology offers this thing called the Introspection Rundown, which I've done a number of videos on. I'll throw a link to one in the description to this podcast. But their quote unquote cure literally has killed people. So it's not like Scientology has some, corner on the market with their reactive mind bullshit, and that's they have a cure for any of this, because they don't. They just think they do. I can tell you, as a former professional Scientologist, they are clueless about this. They're delusionally clueless about the subject of mental health. I mean, they deny it exists, assign it to some cause that's a fantasy, and then treat it with a series of actions that create more stress and trauma on a person and only make the condition even worse. That we know that. So be as critical of psychiatry as you want all day long. There are lots of reasons to be critical of it, but don't pretend that there's some other thing that's got some cure for these situations that are universally applicable. Yeah, maybe one or two people, don't suffer depressive episodes anymore because they sniff Himalayan salt or something. I don't know, or shove things up their butt or something. I don't know. If that works for one or two people, well, great. I'm not going to say it didn't, but I'm certainly not going to say, well, because it worked for a case study of a series of one or two that we've got a new cure on our hands. And this is the kind of woo peddling nonsense that we see all over the internet, which is why if we're not dealing with this at a level of real understanding of what it is we're dealing with, if we're not starting at that place, all the rest of this is just noise and nonsense.
Yeah. And going back to what you were saying about, like, they're saying, well, there's no cure for it, so it's BS. Well, there's no cure for my diabetes either, but I still take insulin so I don't die.
Great point.
It's just that they haven't figured out exactly what it is that they need to do to cure the thing yet, and that doesn't mean there isn't treatment. There's plenty of diseases that don't have cures but have treatments. There's no cure for AIDS yet,
Right.
But we still have come a long way in treating it and keeping people alive.
Exactly. So that was basically our message here, for this week. If you're curious, you can go to the Scientology website and check out their documentaries. Like, it's all over the internet. I mean, we found it like 20 different uploads of the thing. It's really sad, actually, because there's way too many channels out there that have sort of sliced and diced that documentary down to sort of present it as though, well, they have this big anti-psychiatry message, but they're taking stuff from the Church of Scientology, guys. I mean, come on, it's no, please don't be doing that. But if you want to see what Scientology puts out about psychiatry, what I used to think was the holy truth, then you can check out that Psychiatry Industry of Death documentary, and you'll see for yourself what kind of nonsense I'm talking about that I used to, I mean, they blame the Holocaust on psychiatry. They blame racism on psychiatry. They trace every single problem and social ill of society straight to psychiatry. Mm-hmm. That's Scientology. That's what Scientology does. It's black and white for them. There is no middle ground. There's no nuance. So that's why I reject all the Scientology stuff, right? And yet at the same time, I will be critical of psychiatry because, they could be doing a better job, and we always want to be pushing them in that direction.
Yeah, they're not perfect, but I've run into... I mean, it's unfair to just act like psychiatrists are the only doctors that have problems, because there's problems in the field of medicine in general with doctors. And that's not to say all doctors are bad either. There's great doctors out there, but there's also doctors that don't listen to you. There's doctors that, just are not, they should not be doctors. But, it's like any field. There's good and bad, and you can't throw it all out.
No, exactly. I mean, all we're really saying, of course, is that doctors are human beings.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
With all the prejudices, biases, poor education, poor communication skills, vested interests, greed, everything else that is wrong with every other human being. Yeah, that's wrong with doctors too.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't go to a doctor when you need one, because that's the place you go when you need some help. And if one doctor doesn't do it for you, we'll find somebody else who does, because there's certainly no shortage of them around.
Exactly. It's like dating. You just keep going to different doctors till you find one you like.
Exactly. All right. Well, we thought we'd open up a little bit here about this, because I see way too many instances all over the net and in real life of people who just don't get this. And now that I have not only come out of Scientology and gotten rid of that bullshit, but have actually come to learn, right in my own home, how this works, and have other friends who have also experienced this stuff, I thought it was way past time to get this out there in podcast form. And I hope that you guys have found this educational and informative, and hopefully mildly entertaining as well. So stay tuned at the end of the podcast here for another message from me about my channel. Thank you very much for coming around. I am very, very, very interested in all the feedback that you guys have on this one, experiences you might have had yourself with dealing with mental illness, or either with yourself or with your family or friends. Anything you want to say about this, I'm very, very curious about it. So leave those comments on YouTube or at sensiblyspeaking.com. Thanks for coming around again, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, so this is a quick short message about the state of affairs in Shelton Land, in my world. You can see I'm using a bit of a different impromptu background here at my desk, because we have construction going on at the apartments that I'm living in right now, and everything is just kind of a real mess around me. And that leads me to there's a possibility, there's an opportunity that I have right now to get a bigger apartment where I will actually have a room for a studio and not be in my living room. Now, this is kind of obviously important to me, maybe not so important to everybody out there, but then again, for maybe some of you long-term subscribers and people who would like to see an improvement and upgrade in my channel, maybe you could help me pull this off. What I want to do on Patreon is I would like to get up to $1,500 a month from where we're at now. We're pretty close, I think, right now to around $1,200 a month. So if I could bump it up to that, then I could actually have the income to be able to afford to be in that larger apartment that's open right now as a possibility, and then have an actual studio, a dedicated space. And that will improve quite a few things, actually, about the quality of the work that I do here. So if you're at all interested in seeing this channel get upgraded in that direction, then please sign up on Patreon and support my channel and my efforts here to bring you the best work that I can do on a consistent basis with the 3 videos a week that I post. I, of course, appreciate any and all support you guys throw my way, whether it's through a one-off through PayPal or through YouTube, or through a subscription through Patreon. Now, what I can offer you through Patreon in terms of incentive to do this is, and when I first started Patreon, I was not doing special content. I was just saying, hey, look, if you want to back me up, that's the way to do it. But I have since started offering some things to my Patreon supporters only, such as a monthly dedicated Q&A or conversational video that just is between us. It's kind of similar to the live stream Q&As that I do, but it's only for my Patreons, and it's only kept there on my Patreon channel for them. I also have some ideas of some special humorous bonus content that I want to put together with my wife Melissa that I think might appeal to some of you guys too. But there's some surprises there, so I'm just going to say right now that we've got some ideas that we thought might be kind of fun that we could share with you guys. And I am always open to any other ideas people might have as to what might incentivize people to become part of my Patreon support page. So that is my message right now. I'll be tagging this onto my videos for the next couple months as I have this possibility opening up here. See if we can pull this off. Again, the goal is $1,500 on Patreon, so anything you can do to contribute to that would be helpful, whether it's just $1 a month or more. Some people do substantially more, and it is so appreciated. All right, guys, thanks for listening to this message, and I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye.